Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 8 of the Kiss Army Nation podcast. I am your host, Pasquale Vari, and I am joined by my co-host, Andy Moyen. How's it going, Andy?
Hey, how's it going? How's it going out there in the Kiss world? Hey, Pas.
So, since joining the world of podcasting, Andy and I have had a lot of compliments, a lot of support. We were really made to feel like we were part of the family. But, being called a podcaster has to be earned. And I want to understand what we're in for. So to that end, we are joined by two of the great podcasters. First, Matt Porter of The Kiss Room.
Guys, I'm thrilled to be here. This is like deja vu all over again, and I'm so thrilled we can be back to talking.
And, of course, the podfather of Kiss himself, Ken Mills of Podkiss.
The one, the only Ken Mills of the Podkiss.
Hey, Ken, I gotta put you on the spot. Can you do your famous Gene Simmons voice and say, "Welcome to the Kiss Army Nation podcast"?
No, I can't. Okay, here we go. Ready? You are listening to the Kiss Army Nation podcast with these two powerful and attractive men. Ow!
That's nice.
I love it. So
that's how you start the show.
So before we get into the world of podcasting, I want to start by getting to know the people behind the voices. Let's start with Matt. Matt, tell us about yourself. How did you get into Kiss?
So you know what? I was one of those lucky kids in 1976 that got swept up in the wave of Kiss. When you think about 1976, Kiss was everywhere. And I'm 8 years old, and our neighbor would play the albums out the window, and we were just amazed listening to Kiss. And then you started seeing them pop up all the time, and it was just the songs, the image, everything about it. I mean, I think anybody, and I think we're probably all kind of around the same age, but I mean, it's like, you had to kind of be there at the moment to understand what it was that Kiss was taking over. And I was just along for the ride and just absolutely fascinated by what I was finding. So,
Ken, how about you? What's your origin story?
Well, I was born at a very early age, and I was a huge Beatle fan. And as much as I loved the Beatles, and I still love the Beatles are my all-time favorite. No matter how much I love the Beatles, I wanted something that was mine, right? Because the Beatles kind of belonged to my aunts and uncles and my mother. So I wanted my Beatles, right? And I tried the Grateful Dead because I thought with a name as cool as the Grateful Dead, these guys are happy to be dead, right? So they got to be good, right? So I tried them out, and it was a bunch of hippie music, which is fine. Nothing against the Grateful Dead. It just wasn't what I was looking for. And I tried Black Sabbath, and they literally scared the hell out of me because it's like, what is this I see before me? Right? And it's like kind of scary. Then I got into Led Zeppelin a little bit, but for every you had, and I went up on the hills of Mordor, and it was like, more hippie stuff. So I wanted something that was a little more oomph, and here comes Alice Cooper, and here comes David Bowie. And I'm like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And school's out, right? Everything's great. Everything's going good. And then they both announced retirement parties around the same time because Alice Cooper was going to go solo and become Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare. David Bowie was killing Ziggy Stardust. And now I'm left without those compasses now, right? And here comes Kiss going right down the middle of the bowling alley lane. Boom, strike. And when I found them, it was just amazing. I had the 8-track of Dress to Kill, and I had seen pictures of them like in Cream magazine and stuff like that. But I had a neighbor who had all these 8-tracks, and I was spending the summer at my grandmother's. And he said, I'll tell you what, you can borrow like these 20 8-tracks if you wash my car every week. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. So for almost 3 months, I washed his car like all the time. And because I wanted those 8-tracks, right? And then one day, close to the beginning of the school year, I went up and knocked on his door, said, "Hey, I'm here to wash your car." He's like, "You don't need to be here right now." And I look, and there's this like really hot blonde in the house, right? And he's like, just go. And I said, "But what about the tapes?" And he's like, "You can keep them all." So I now had a 8-track of Dressed to Kill. And that was good and all, don't get me wrong. I still couldn't figure Kiss out. What was the image? What was going on? Because I'm looking at something this big on the tape, right? And it's like, are they wearing suits? Like, is this their new costumes? They're wearing suits because I saw them with leather and stuff. So are they now wearing suits on stage? I didn't know. And now we're in school, and he picks me up, and he's got the double Alive 8-track. So there's 2 of them. One's in my hand. He goes, "Check this out, Mills." We get in his Camaro and he drive around, and Parasite comes on. And it was like, "A bolt of lightning hit me on my head." And it was just like that. And it was just unbelievable. And I said, "I got to hear that song again." But because we were listening to 8-track, we had to drive around a bit because you had to get back to it. You know what I'm talking about? Oh, yeah. I know what Ken's talking about if you've ever had an 8-track. So we drove around and we're late to school. And, the principal read us the riot act. I didn't give a damn. And I remember looking at that 8-track of Kiss Alive. I'm going, which one? I only see pictures of Gene and Cream magazine. So he must, that's the guy that must do all the talking. So in my young mind, Gene Simmons was the guy going, "Oh yeah." Who knew? Who knew? I had not yet seen them move. And then they were on Midnight Special, and that was it. I was sunk. And my mom told me, "You can stay up late and use the living room TV if you clean up the house." So I'm like cleaning up the house because Kiss is going to be on. I want to check them out. And I put a bunch of stuff I made a pile to sort in front of the TV. And the TV comes on. There they are in color. And it was when Gene's doing that bass part in She. And it's just like evil crept out of the television set and poured across the room. It felt like something out of The Ring. And that was it. Hooked, line, and sinker. It was Kiss for me. Nothing was going to turn me away.
I gotta say, you, Ken, are the godfather of Kiss podcast. You are the man who started it all, if I am correct. If I'm not correct, shoot me anyways, but I'm pretty sure that I am correct, and I'm every little representing today on both of you guys' podcast, podcast, and Mr. Matt Porter.
Look at that.
The Kiss Room. So, we just don't, not just about ourselves, it's about everybody else that's on this show too. But you are the man, Ken. We got to bow to you. You are the starter, and we got to give it to Mr. Matt Porter too, because Matt, you are the voice of radio. You know what I mean?
Woo!
You are the voice of radio. So we are just like we should be bowing, right? Right, Pat?
Well, let me say something about this. There'd be no podcast if it weren't for Gary Schaller, because I didn't know what a podcast was at all. And one thing that Matt and I learned early on is that the more we promote one another, the bigger we get, period. Matt, back me up.
And it's funny because I never really, when I started doing it, I didn't think of myself as a podcast. I was a radio show that happened to then replay it. And I never replayed the early days. There was for years, and I mean, for anybody that knows the Kiss Room, obviously they know all these stories, is that I broadcast via Monco Radio out of Montgomery County Community College. And I would always sneak onto Monco Radio around obviously, look, and anybody that's listening right now, they're laughing, but I would always sneak on around May 11th, because May 11th, 1974 was when Kiss was supposed to play Monco. So I would sneak onto Monco Radio and do what I would just call a Kiss special. And then, I would go on sometimes around my birthday, which is January. So there's maybe not a lot of students around because the classes are out. or spring break. There wouldn't be a lot of students around, so I would go live. Well, little did I know at the time, Ken actually listened to Monco Radio, and he was hearing some of these KISS specials. And then and the funny thing is when you go back in my own history, the first podcast that I ever appeared on was actually, if you remember, Creatures of the Net. Cassius Morris, the young superstar, everybody knows Cassius. Cassius was 11, and his co-host Sapphire was 16. So I think if you added their ages together and doubled it, I might have still been older. But it was that was around like August 2011 was when Sonic Boom had come out. And I was actually on talking about Sonic Boom, which I found fascinating, talking to these two youngsters who clearly were not of the same era that I was as far as becoming a KISS fan, which I found absolutely so appealing because they had a totally different jumping in point than what I did. And then again, this will, a lot of the fans that are listening, I thought Sonic Boom was going to be the album that brought everybody together because there's 70s influences and 80s influences. Sounds a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it seems the total opposite. Either you love it or hate it. But that was August 2011. So I was on that. And then Ken said to me, hey, look, I heard you on Cash's show and I've heard your show. You should come on our show. So I was on the podcast. That was then, so if it was Cassius was August 2011, it was October 2011. Podcast number 52 was my first appearance then on the podcast. So those are my first podcast appearances. And then it wouldn't be till like May. I did a May 11th special in 2012, and it was just still called the KISS Super Special or whatever, the on Monco Radio. And Ken was like, man, you should do this all the time. You should do this all the time. And right after that was when I decided, okay, it's going to be called the KISS Room. I'll do it, just once a month, sometimes twice a month. But it was going to be a KISS Super Special, but it was going to be called the KISS Room. Bought thekissroom.com, started, bought Podomatic space. But in my mind, it's always been, it's a radio show first, and then I rebroadcast it, but then it's a podcast. So, and I've just been very fortunate because obviously Monco Radio has good equipment. So I could sneak in there, and have a studio and be live. And that's actually, there's a little bit of trivia that I love the fact for you guys, for your podcast, and I'm going to say this very proudly, is the second ever episode of the KISS Room. If you go back to July 2012, my featured guest is Bruce Kulick, interviewed by Frank Hagen from Kiss Mask. But it also features, and anybody wants to go back in time, and look, Andy's got a copy of Kiss Mask, which I love that. And I'll tell you a funny story about that later. But the second ever issue of the KISS Room features Superfan Andy's wicked awesome Kiss Cruise commentary. He was my guest, and we made a little intro bumper, and it plays, and then he comes on, and we ran. That was, and I know that was probably, was that your first appearance on like a podcast or something?
Yeah. We were doing the I don't know, what is it? That was it? You said 2012?
Yeah.
So it was early, yeah. Yeah, Jeff, myself, and some his wife Denise, and my mother ended up jumping in and helping out. But we wanted to kind of get the word out there more and more. And, and I don't know, I messaged you one day, and you're like, yeah, you got to come on the KISS Room. All right, I'll come on the KISS Room. And then I remember being at work, and you said to me, you were sending me messages, PM, saying, man, contact me at 3:00, but I'm like, dude, I'm still at work, but I'll sneak around the corner. But and then Matt kept saying, dude, don't say, because we say we're live, but we're not actually live, but say we're live just to make it cooler. You can't go live. Well, you can go live, but if something really screws up or if somebody swears too much, what are you gonna, you know what I mean? So, and I know where you're coming from because you're doing it from a school, so you don't want somebody to do the bleep because it's just gonna be, you don't want that. So, and I get it, right? So next thing you know, I'm at work. He's like, hey, you there yet? I'm like, hold on. So I actually sneak around the corner at 3:00. I go to another whole area where nobody's around. I'm still working. And next thing I'm here, and I'm talking as fast as I can, even though I talk fast anyways. I'm talking as fast as I can for about, he says, you got about, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes. I'm like, me? 2 minutes, man? And I'm going like 100 miles an hour. Yeah, we're having this big party. You got to come down to Miami. This is going to be great. It's for free. You get no tickets, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And thank you for being on the, I'm like going 100,000 miles an hour.
Well, it was funny because that's the thing. We had you in the first hour of the show, and then because I knew we had Bruce Kulick calling in, and I'm still pretty new at that point, so I'm like nervous that I got Bruce calling in, and this was a big deal. And Bruce, I always say I owe a debt of gratitude to Bruce Kulick because in that episode he says, I don't know for sure, but I know Ace is trying to get back in the band. And that's 2012. And man, everybody lit up because now there was new news about Kiss that they didn't maybe hear. So Bruce, if you're listening to this podcast, and I know that you probably are, thank you for helping me put a flag on the planet, because people want to know what the Kiss Room was. Now, here's the funny thing. That issue of Kiss Mask that you just held up, hold that up again. That tour, Frank Hagen was able to get us backstage passes. That's Hot in the Shade tour. So that tour, when they came to the Spectrum, we were able to go backstage, and I got to meet all four members that night. But the one thing about Paul Stanley that I always think about was, of course, at that point the meet and greets were very different. They were giving people passes, so you were just in a giant room, and they would come in and just kind of mingle around. And first Eric Carr came out. And he couldn't have been nicer. He was the nicest guy. He's as nice as everybody always says. That's Eric Carr. Bruce Kulick, same thing. Comes walking out, nice to everybody. Wants to know your name, signs everybody's stuff. Paul comes out, and this is the best. Of course, you're rapid fire trying to say something cohesive. Blah, 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 and I do this fancy. And Paul Stanley stops and says, I saw it this afternoon. It's got those 4 pictures. And he described the cover of that one that's in your hand. And maybe every fanzine had a picture of their 4 faces, but he really seemed to know what it was. And I was so thrilled that he actually knew what it was, like something that I did. And people, and really, I was just a speck of sand on the beach as far as Kiss Mask. I did a couple drawings for it here and there. That was really Frank Hagen, and he had a whole other group of people. But that was a thrill for me. And I love the fact that anybody that, if they're watching, anybody that goes into their collections, that's how you know Andy is the super fan, because he's got Kiss Mask issues. They're kind of hard to find. So that's thrilling that you have that.
and for some strange, I don't know why or how, I finally got lucky. I actually won.
You were the winner. Look at that.
Winner chicken dinner.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny because Ken was calling, they called it Podkiss was the fanzine for your ears, from the start. And anybody that worked on a paper fanzine back then, you knew what kind of labor of love it had to be because you were doing everything by hand. It was glued and pasted. And if you ever read that awesome book that talks about fanzines, everyone's story starts with, I work in some kind of printing press because you know what are you going to do? But I mean, it's funny because back then, if you look inside Hot in the Shade, there's a whole list of fanzines. They really seemed to respect fanzines and the things that fans were doing. I don't know that podcasts get the same love from the band because now everybody has a much bigger platform. They don't need us to get the word out because they can go and tweet whatever they want. But back then, that was pretty cool. And I knew a bunch of people that did fanzines. Yeah, see, look at that. In fact, there's one of my drawings. If you bring that down a little bit, that Paul Stanley, I drew that. Look at that. Cool. So now I know you get to see everybody on the planet who's much more talented than me. But I was so proud of those kind of things. I would just draw these little kind of doodles and put them in. And so, look, anybody that has that, you send it to me, I'll sign it for free. It's because, it's worth even less then. But it would be great if you have that in your collection.
It's weird, Matt. I didn't know this, but I also used to do some fanzine artwork back in the day. You and I are kind of like
we have very similar eyes. If I could grow a mustache up the top like you, and I could grow my hair out like you, we could look a lot alike. I'm not so powerful and attractive, but I get uglier by the minute.
No, you're a powerful and attractive man.
So, Ken, what about you? Tell us about your podcasting adventures. How did you get into podcasting?
Well, I didn't know what a podcast was, but I had done radio. I have a face for radio, so it all works out. It all is a thing. But Gary Schaller contacted me, said, I want to do a podcast. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I want to do a podcast. Can you walk me through this? Well, it's if you have an iPad, you can subscribe and it'll download to the thing. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to buy an iPad just to listen to you talk. And he said, I just want you to help out with the artwork. So I designed the logo. I did the artwork, and everybody was like, wow, I don't know what's going on, but I have to check this out because it looks cool, So we made it. It looked cool. And then for the first 2 months, I didn't know what I was working on. Then I got high speed because I started working from home and I heard the podcast for the first time. And I said, this is radio. I can do this. And it was really neat because I said to Gary, you know, we can get people to come on the show. You know that, right? He's like, we can. And I'm like, yeah. And, you know, we got Bruce Kulick to come on early on, and it kept going and going. I mean, to have Peter Criss and Ace Frehley and, you know, everything else that's happened to us getting to go backstage. It's amazing, this kind of nonsense that's happened, you know, that it's been a wonderful thing. You know, you're right, Matt, where we wrote that this is the fanzine for your ears. And, you know, you were talking about how like Kiss doesn't seem to need the podcast as much as they did the fanzine. Because when it was Hot in the Shades and Revenge, they needed fanzines back then. The reason now is because they can go on ASX TV and talk to 1 million people, or they can talk to people who already listen to Kiss. Like, for example, Matt and I'm sure that we tried to get Paul to come on our shows, our respective shows, which is really the same show. It's just two sides of the coin, right? So there you go. Exactly. So, you know, the thing is anybody that's going to buy Soul Station because they're a Kiss fan is probably already listening to us, and they're already going to buy it. But for Paul to go on ASX TV or Access TV or whatever, or, you know, Colbert or something like that, that's where they're thinking, because they look at the people that listen to us as they have already got them. So they want to reach beyond that all the time. Always got to reach beyond. It's kind of like the Monkees. All right, they put out their stuff on Blu-ray, and it kind of sold really well. And then there was a warehouse situation, and the rest of them got lost. And people are like, "Well, we really need these Blu-rays to come back." And it's like, no, we really don't. And here's why: because what made the Monkees big was TV and the music, and then what made them big in the '80s was MTV, right? So we don't need them to be on, you know, for me, a collector, I want them on Blu-ray, I want them on DVD. But for the new fans that are out there, they got to be on YouTube. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's weird because you look at all the bands that really use social media during the times of COVID, right? Those are the bands that are already ready to snap and go right now. They've been back in business. They never left in a way. They've been entertaining the whole time. I know that I mentioned earlier about how the more we promote one another, the bigger we get. It's the old concept of all ships rise, right? Mm-hmm. With the tide. And Matt and I have never feared advertising other shows. As a matter of fact, at the end of every episode of Podcast in the Kiss Room, we'd have like a 6-minute thing just of ads for other shows that we respected, you know? And it was such a rare concept, I think, that people didn't know how to take our appeal to, like, if we like your show, make a commercial and we'll air it. And they're like, what do you want? And I'm like, nothing, just we're trying to help you, you know? But the neat thing is that if I don't care if you got 100 listeners or 10,000 listeners or 100,000 listeners, if there's somebody out there that has never heard of the podcast, they're going to watch your show and go, I should check that show out, right? So we're all in the Kiss Army. We should walk in lockstep, you know.
See, I say it's pay it forward, because when I started, exactly. I was very new. You were already established. And then when you said to me, hey, look, why don't I distribute the Kiss Room via the podcast, you know, which even so 10 years ago already had 13,000 subscribers before anybody kind of even knew, you know, what podcast was. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I used to actually download it and burn it to CDs so I could listen in my car, because I didn't have an iPod. It wasn't until I think a car later that I actually had a USB jack and all that. So I would burn it to CDs. But it was that support, I mean, of you giving me the seal of approval that, I mean, turned a lot of people onto the Kiss Room very early on. So I'm always happy when I find a podcast that I like to promote it, especially because you want to see the things that you like succeed. You know, you guys are doing Andy Pasquale. It's great. And I want you to succeed. So if I can turn people onto it, that means you'll keep doing it. If you look at your download numbers and it's 3, you might go, oh, this is stupid. So, and it's funny. That's a lot of time, I talk to a lot of people that have tried to do a podcast and they say, well, how do you get people to listen? And it's just like, doing the show is easy. Getting people to listen is the hard part. It's like, because you're competing with everybody on the planet. It's funny. I saw a post the other day was something about Cassius had this post, and he was saying, don't wait, for anybody's permission to do what you want and do this and that and the other and do a podcast. And I'm thinking, who's waiting for permission? You'd have a harder time finding somebody who doesn't do a podcast than somebody who does.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I want your opinion on something.
Okay.
Ken, you were talking about editing on Facebook, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Matt, you were just saying that in a sense you have radio and podcasting, two different beasts. One of them is no editing, and one of them is potential editing. So a podcast, should it be start to finish, whatever happens, warts and all, or should there be editing in a podcast, or limited editing? Ken.
Okay, I want to take this. Anyone who thinks, which by the way, I'm doing the Paul Stanley talking.
Yes.
Every Kiss fan recognizes this.
Yep.
And when you start talking and you do this, you go, "Oh my God, I'm doing that thing." Anyone that thinks the Kiss Room, because it's live, that there's no preparation. Matt does pre-editing. Am I right, Matt?
What's funny is the last year being locked down out of the studio, I've had to really change, because I was used to, I would edit all kind of bumpers and bits, and a lot of time I would have a CD with all the songs I thought I would go to, because you want to be prepared. But the difference between it is, and some people are used to going Facebook Live or whatever, but there's nothing greater than when you hit that mic and slide it up and you just lean right in. You say you're listening to Monco Radio, where music and minds meet. And you see how Ken's mouthing right along because he knew what my line would be. And I mean, really, it's one of those things where then you can open up the phone, you can get people to call in. Sometimes it was tougher. In the beginning, I really wanted people to call in live. Like when I'm pressuring Andy to, at work, sneak around and come on with us live, because I wanted people to be even able to ask questions. Like I'd be looking up at the Facebook. If somebody then had a question, I could say, Andy, so-and-so just asked, and then, we throw it back and forth like that. But then, and it's funny, I had Bill Baker finally on the show the other week, and I've known Bill for a long time. But he would always tell me I can't call in at 3:00 because I'm at work, and I'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. So just the other month, I actually recorded the interview with him, because the entire Kiss Room is pre-recorded now until we can get back in the studio. So for me, I would say that like when I would do it live, what you would get live for the first 8 years of the Kiss Room pretty much was exactly what went out over the air. Is I would record it as we went. I'd pull the flash drive out of the machine, and that's the most terrifying minute as I would walk from the studio to my office to make sure the file was there. What if something happened to it? There was one time I had a file that wouldn't open and the whole show was gone. And if you heard it live, you heard it live. If you didn't, it was gone. And I was crushed. I was so upset. Oh, it was gone. That flash drive, I have a flash, and believe it or not, it's funny because I have a flash drive that looks like R2-D2. And I always say, the information on this R2 unit is vital to the survival of the Kiss Room. But it's one of those things where, live, what you heard was exactly what went up. And I never made any edits. And it's funny, that's one of there's a couple of things I probably should have edited out looking back. One of my worst thoughts was the time Robert Fleischman, of course, everybody knows from the Vinnie Vincent Invasion, he was going to call in. I met him a couple times. He's always super nice every time I meet him. My phone line won't work.
Oh.
And I am freaking out because I can't get the phone. Like, so not only am I the host, but I'm not trying to troubleshoot. So I'm behind this rack pulling out cables, trying to figure out why the phone's not working. In the meantime, he finally calls in and I say something, oh, I'm so sorry. I should have a better line. And he's like, you know, you really should have a good phone line. And he was a super good sport about it. But then in the same way, I was thrilled because I'm talking to Robert Fleischman. You know, this is the coolest dude. And he's on my phone on my show live, and I can't get a phone line that works, you know, and you know, and if you listen to that episode, you'll hear me, you know, really complaining. There was another episode where Richie Rano from Stars, and of course, Richie ran a lot of the early Kiss Expos as well. But Richie is live with us. He's talking to me live, and he says, yeah, I'm going to pull over. I got to order some lunch. And you hear him say, like, I want a chicken sandwich. We go to a song, and then he came back. And I remember, to me, the reason why it sticks in my mind, and that's early in the Kiss Room, is because it was so raw, so real, and you all heard it exactly as it happened live together. So that's why I say I always think of myself as a radio show, even though now, for the last, I mean, during lockdown of COVID, we've been pre-recorded. I've been doing the same thing as everybody else, where, you know, you pre-record, splice together, and you can cut out if somebody curses. And I think you understand that now. So it's
right. But people don't realize how much time you spent in prep.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the live versus Memorex kind of a thing,
Yeah.
right? Because you either have a chance to do it right once or to do it right twice, basically.
You got to be ready, because if you're not ready and you're live, and to me, that's the thing. And look, and anybody, if you ever get a chance to do it, but when you're live, the adrenaline of being live, of walking into the studio, and there's that, I wouldn't call it nervous because I don't really necessarily get nervous about it, but I get really amped up. Like, I walk in there, I'm like going in like it's a prize fight. I'm going to do a great show, and man, I think a lot of it, it's like two of the people I always think that I would love to tell, Gene Simmons and Ric Flair, as far as broadcasting, that vibe. You want to be like Gene
Shot
Simmons
out of a cannon.
always is just like, appears to be so confident. I want that on the radio. Ric Flair, just the, you know, as far as a talker, as far as confidence, like those are kind of people, and really probably one of my biggest influences. I was David Lee Roth. When Roth would come on like Howard Stern show, and he'd be doing all that hibbity hobbity kind of talking, but then he always does that thing where he drops down low. And I know I stole that from him. And it's funny. I'm one of the few people I know that thought David Lee Roth's radio show was going to be really successfve. But who knew? And I think the problem wasn't even with that. That's a whole other tangent. We wanted Diamond Dave, and we got Dave Roth. You know, Dave Roth, and doing the show, and he's talking about being a paramedic. I want to hear about the backstage and how you're going to flip the stage around and turn it so everybody's backstage.
Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. We got Matt the Cat Porter right here, live on Dave TV. Come on, Matt. Hit him with a little bit shot out of a cannon followed by a woo. Let's do it. Do it.
So it's funny. Shot out of a cannon was something that, because I would come into this studio and I would be wound up, and I would say, man, I am shot out of a cannon, because I'm engineering the show and being the host of the show. So you're like firing on all cylinders, and there's not a better feeling when it comes out good. And I feel from just this last year of kind of doing it, you know, in a more traditional podcast way, I don't get as amped up. I have to really psych myself up to bring it, you know, to you know, without, because I love the fact when I can look up and I can see that people are actually listening.
Right.
That charges me up. I think that's like looking out in the crowd and seeing people.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they know they're lip syncing back your words, and you're like, yeah, that's right. You're listening to me. So it's
well, it's really.
And they're all from all over the world, what makes it cooler too, right?
I think that is amazing. The fact that there can be people like the other day, like Mikhail Burrell has been listening to, and he's in Sweden, and he's been a listener since the early early days of the Kiss Room. And I remember he messaged me and I was just blown away that a guy in Sweden, because if I'm on at 3:00 on a Friday, that's 9:00 in Sweden, 9:00 at night. I'm prime time. You know, there's this great band from the UK called Blitz, which I've had on my show. And the fact that they messaged me saying, we listened to your show, can we come on and promote our record? I'll never get to Nottingham, the UK, but the fact that I can connect with these cool guys with their band and they respect what I do and they trust that they want to come on the Kiss Room to promote what they're doing, I love that. And I mean, I'll never get over there. I'd love to go over there if I was a millionaire and I'm going to win the Mega Million at some point. And I'll go over to their shows. It would be the greatest. I want to go to some club where they're at and see them. You know, it's like, but in the meantime, like when somebody in Australia is wearing a Kiss Room shirt, it's funny. I've heard Gene and Paul say that seeing people wear their T-shirts is still the greatest thrill. That is a damn thrill when you see, and I've seen people at shows and expos with Kiss Room buttons and Kiss Room shirts. And when it's somebody that I didn't see, I love that. The fact that you got that on, Andy, that really thrills me because it means I probably either handed it to you, but the fact that you have it, you know, and in my tiny, minuscule portion of history, the fact that there's people out there that have Kiss Room swag, I love that, you know, so I think I don't know even what the question was, but
we were talking about editing and all that stuff. But like you mentioned, people around the world, it's also really cool when you go somewhere and it's like we saw Kiss over in Memphis and we're just going through the crowd like everybody else. And this person started screaming, "All right, Kiss Army. All right, Kiss Army. All right, Kiss Army." And then I see this guy stand in front of me. "All right, Kiss Army." And I'm like,
you're about to be podcast.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, you're doing the bit. I get it. That's awesome. You rock. But like, you know, Linda was like, is this guy going to kill us? What's going on?
You know, it's funny. That's the one thing that I love is the fact that it gives you some platform that now you are able to connect with people. Like yeah. I think, Andy, I think the first time that I ever had seen it, you was, do you remember that Ultimate Kiss Fan contest? And there you're sitting on the toilet in the Kiss Palace. That's the start of your video. Cassius, definitely. That's how I connected with Cassius and again, he's 10 at the time, 10 years old, but he's messaging me because, I mean, literally, if you go back, my video was the first one in that contest. I know it. I saw it. They announced it on a Friday. I had it shot, edited, and uploaded by Monday. And that's a fact. And the funny thing is, so he messaged me right away. And it's like this 10-year-old wants to talk about Kiss. And it was a way to, and I met a lot of cool people via that contest because then people knew who you were. Like, and that's pre-Kiss Room. But having a show like this, that's the thing. It gives people some recognition of you that's more than just your selfie, you know, on Facebook or whatever. Pasquale, the same thing. I remember the first time I met you was that you had come all the way down to Bluebell for the Alive 75 show.
That's right.
And the funny thing is I was kind of in charge of a lot of the stuff. I mean, they did all their own stuff. I was kind of in charge of an event that we built around it. But I remember I'm pulling a table or something down the hall and I see you coming right down the hall. And it's surreal to meet people in your real life that you really kind of only know via Facebook or whatever, but I recognize you right away. And I find that kind of stuff magic. And here we are in 2021, the fact that, you know, and you can walk up to somebody that you just know online. And I know everybody out there that's listening to this, if you were at that Bushkill Falls show, you have a picture with you and Andy in his Ace makeup because I watched you that night getting pictures with every person. And the same with, what was that? The one up in Wilkesboro, the Mohegan, what's it not? Is it Mohegan somewhere? I don't even remember what it's called. No, it's the Montage Mountain. The Montage Mountain. Same thing with that as Andy in the Kiss makeup. Every person wanted a picture, groups of pictures gathering around him. There's the challenge for your podcast. Anybody that's listening, if you have a picture with Andy in one of his Kiss makeup costumes, post it because, and it was fun because that's the thing that, you know, it gives you some sense of, you know, it gives you a platform that people then know you. And it is funny, like what Ken said was that when people will come up and actually want to talk about something that you did on your show, that blows my mind.
Yes,
like, the
very
fact
much.
that anybody listens enough to even know what I talk about.
Mhm.
And then when they want to talk about, remember that time that you said this, that, and the other, what do you think about this? That? I love that. And,
Yeah,
It happened to me. It happened to me literally 2 weeks ago. I was in a record store, okay, just doing my thing, looking for the Kiss stuff, and some guy, a guy, young, a little bit, I could tell he was younger than me, and he's looking for stuff. And I heard him say his girlfriend wanted this country album, and he was looking for it. Right, no big deal. He's doing his own thing on his own side. Leaves, comes back in the door because the place is only so big. And I'm just going through stuff, and next, I'm paying for my stuff, and the guy just comes over to me, and he says, "Hey." I said, "Hey," and I'll talk to anybody. I don't care. He didn't have a Kiss shirt on. I don't care. I'll talk to anybody who wants to talk. It don't bother me. So he's like, "Hey, is your name Andy?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Man, you did all that. You did a bunch of stuff for Florida, right? Miami, and all this stuff, and parties, and And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Man, you're friends with Pasquale Pass." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, you guys got a new podcast, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." And the guy was like, "Yeah." And he talked to me, and he goes, "Oh, well, okay, thank you. I'm sorry for bothering you. I'm just going." And then he turned around and just walked away. I didn't even get the guy's name. It was so, it's just so unreal. And like you said, yeah. And it's like you said with the when you go to the shows, if I when I dress up, it's like one person. The one person got to come over to me, and that's when the floodgates happen. The one person, everybody's around like a circle or an area, and they're like, and then the one person will come up and say, "Is it all right if I take a picture with you?" And I just like, "Well, yeah, that's why I'm kind of here like this." And the one person that does it, and then all of a sudden it's like the floodgates. It's like,
you couldn't
Especially
move
the
2
early
steps. Everybody wanted your picture.
Yeah.
And I remember that night was both of those shows I'm thinking of. The weather was gorgeous. They were Saturday nights, and people were wound up, and it was a blast. And and you were bringing a lot of people joy. They want the picture with you. It's nice.
Yeah.
And it's funny what you said. And like, people remember some of those things, like obviously your cruise parties. But one of the things that, like, if you post something on social media, the one thing I love, the greatest statement that somebody can reply with, "I was there."
Yeah.
Because the thing now is you have that connection with people. Then they can share their story. The thing I love about what you guys are doing on your podcast, it's fan stories. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear about somebody's experience that was probably at the same show that I was at, but in 1996. I don't think we even had social media. I had a flip phone. So it's like, I don't even have good pictures of it. But like, that idea, I was there and you were there. And we were could have been shoulder to shoulder.
Oh,
Expos. Expos. Think of those early days of the Expos. The place would be
Men's
packed.
rooms.
The men's room. That's wherever you are, Ken. I'm not judging, but it was great because now, like the fact that people will post pictures of themselves at an event that you were at, because especially like those early days, there wasn't a lot of photos because everybody wasn't carrying a high def, camera in their pocket.
Right.
So whenever I post something, if I post something and somebody replies with "I was there," that thrills me. That's what it comes back to, is the shared experience of Kiss fans. Some people look and, Kiss fans all their life. Those stories, that's what I like to hear. More than like, not even, well, what do you think of this song? What do you think of that song? I expect you love it. But, what was that moment? What was the concert? What was that meet and greet, expo? What was that thing you found at a flea market that you couldn't believe? A Paul Stanley costume from the 70s is still in the box and the rubber band's not broken. I found it at a flea market. Now you can't get away with that. But those kind of things, that's what I like. That's what I've always tried to do on my show. And I think I'm thrilled that's what you guys are doing on your show. So
Yeah.
Even Pasquale, right? I was at a show up in Montreal
That's
on a
right.
really, really cold day, and I was dressed up, and it was freezing out. I remember recognizing Pasquale, Dan, Mike, and Pasquale doesn't even remember me. And I'm like, I was dressed up. He goes, I don't remember you at all. I don't even know who you were. And I'm like, dude, I know who you were.
there are years that I don't remember, but I stopped drinking.
I remember being at a show in Ottawa, and I was walking down the aisle, and this couple were talking about me. So I just stopped and listened in. The guy turns around, sees me, and goes, "Oh my God, it's you. It's Pasquale. I was just talking about you." It's like, oh my God, I'm a nobody. But that's the beauty of being a Kiss fan, right? It's building those connections with other people. And for me, that's the high of this podcast. Like you said, Matt, the fan profiles are my favorite because we talk about people just like you and me.
Exactly. And it really is that Kiss Army, the vibe of, I love that idea that we are one, that Kiss Army, that you could walk up to somebody and have a conversation. And obviously the dynamic changes online when people can hide behind a keyboard and they would say things they probably wouldn't say to you in real life. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, people are cool and I like meeting them. So.
Yeah, but there's also another side of the connection that we're talking about is that you will get emails and PMs from people that you maybe never heard of before. Like every once in a while, an email will come through on the podcast, and I don't check it all the time, but every once in a while, one will come in, and it's somebody saying you were there when. My son was being born and I was out in the waiting room. You were there when I was in therapy because I had a leg issue and I had to learn how to walk again on my left foot. Or it could be I worked third shift and you guys are what keeps me going. And it's amazing to think that there are people we will never know how far our reach goes. Like you mentioned, Australia, everywhere. It doesn't matter what country, whatever. You can see on, if you go to the control panel, you can see this image of the globe, right? And it'll say Czechoslovakia or Botswana or China. And you've got listeners literally everywhere on the planet Earth. And it leads so many doors open for us. It's just been an amazing thing. And I'm so glad that Gary said, "Hey, would you like to do some artwork for this thing?" You know what I mean? And speaking of artwork, Matt, we did not tell the story yet about the Kiss Room logo. That's your cue.
See, that's the funny thing is, and again, I'm always, and I said this on the May issue of the Kiss Room, but I've always been very appreciative. Like, Ken has, see, now that logo right there that's on Andy's screen. I originally, like when I started the show, I didn't have a logo or anything. And then one day I literally drew it on a napkin, sent it to Ken and said, "Can you make this look good? Like clean it up." And that became the logo that we have. And I mean, it's funny because like it's been on, t-shirts and posters and I love the fact that it looks as cool as it does. I think having a cool logo, there is something to it. And so I've always been very appreciative. Ken made it look really good. I have,
what's the line
laying around my house? I have, of course, buttons because I designed it, but Ken refined it, we always say the same Kiss thing, but I love it, and it's something that, and like I said, it goes back to whenever you see somebody that is, we had guitar picks of, Jim Zagel, who was in the Kiss Room house band. He actually had some guitar picks made up. And I think, Pasquale, you were actually at the event with the Live 75, where I was giving away, and you were helping me give away Christmas presents and stuff. And we did that bit a couple times. And I'm throwing Kiss Room guitar picks into the audience. And I know why these guitar players do it. It makes you feel like $1 million when you see people reaching up and trying to get your guitar pick. And they're probably thinking, well, who's this jabroni? I never heard of him. I'm here to see you Live 75. But still, I would love watching people, grab for them. And then you see them looking at it. And, and people will ask me every once in a while, "Hey, look, can I have one of those? I collect guitar picks." And the great thing about the guitar picks, you just mail them. They don't cost anything to mail because they're so light. Really. So look, Ken, thank you for making a cool logo.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Seriously, Matt, I don't say this enough, but thank you for coming on to the show. Like, you guys are trying to do a weekly show. I think that's insanity. I think anybody that's trying to do a weekly show, don't you have a life?
God bless you.
And then
my girlfriend hates me right now.
Well, it gets worse because, like, we were talking about podcasting and how it opens doors. We did the podcast, so I'm like, "Oh, this is great." I've always liked Cheap Trick. It's a shame they don't have a podcast. So Ken makes Cheap Talk, right? I like the Monkees. They've been crapped on a lot, so we're going to make Zilch a Monkees podcast. I don't have enough between Kiss, Cheap Trick, and the Monkees. I'm going to just start a general podcast, which led to a game show, or the Fun Size Game Show, to just anything. Talk about the Muppets, The Walking Dead, anything. Star Wars.
No.
You and Gary were on it. You know what I mean?
The answer is no.
It's funny you say that, because the fact that, like, I was in a seminar the other day, and the guy was talking about podcasting, and somebody said to him, well, how do you decide what you should podcast about? And the guy said, you need to come up with a topic that you could talk about 100 times and not get bored with, right? And we were all kind of laughing. But even that, I think I might have been on the first or second issue of the Cheap Talk one.
Yeah.
But then I remember the problem is I couldn't hang. I don't know enough about Cheap Trick to really be in. Like, they're going through the minutiae. Well, the time that Pete Comita played the 20-string bass instead of Tom, oh God, I like Surrender. It's like I'm a surface area. Like, with some of these people would come on and they could tell you, well, the fifth take of if you want my love, you got it. And I'm like, okay, but so you got to know, for anybody that's thinking about doing a podcast, you got to know how deep you're going to get.
Yeah. Well, speaking about people that would start podcasts, every once in a while, for whatever reason, someone would get bent out of shape. I'm doing the Paul thing again. Someone would get bent out of shape about something you and I might have said, or the fact that we allow all eras of Kiss to be celebrated.
Right.
Like, that'll tick people off. Like,
Yep.
I only want Mark St. John. Like, there's got to be some guy out there, right? That's his whole thing, right? There's got to be one guy out there. It's Mark St. John's Kiss or nothing. There's got to be that person out there. But it's weird, because there was one
Kiss.
Yeah, well, trademarked, attempted trademark. But the weird thing is that there was one guy who pops up every once in a while on the podcast page, but he said to Matt and me, I will show you guys how to do podcasts properly, and I will bury you. And it's like, well, when's the first episode drop? And then there's those people that do 1, 2, maybe 3, and ghost town. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, which, whatever. But see, if you get into it for the wrong reasons, it's going to end not in the way you want it. You know what I mean? I am so glad that I got into podcasting, in the same way that, like, when I was a DJ, it opened up so many doors. Podcasting has opened up so many doors, and we've been able to help people, whether it be through charity. Those buttons, for example, shout out to the button queen, Christine. Those buttons, they've went all around the world. There is nobody that you cannot imagine how far these things have went. Matt will tell you. And it was so cool, because, like, we do the Rockin' Pod, and if you ever get a chance to go to the Rockin' Pod, it'll blow your mind, because it is literally your Facebook come to life, back when it was good. So it's your Facebook come to life, and you're gonna get people that come up to you that you've never talked to, you've never PM'd with, but they found out you were going to be there. We were doing the first Kiss panel at the first podcast, and this guy came in with really long hair, and I'm like, wow, he looks like a musician. And it turned out it was Larry Roberts from the band November's Doom, and he just beelined right up to us as soon as we were done. He's like, I caught a flight here as soon as I could. I had to come see you guys. You know what I mean? The sweetest guy in the world. And then you find out, like, people like John Humphrey of the band Seether, or Derek Brown from the band The Flaming Lips. And we're not talking about just like, I like Kiss and I play this kind of music. We're talking about people from all walks of life. And it's just been amazing. It literally has changed my life, and it's even helped me get to a healthier place. Seriously. I was joking earlier. I'm gonna show them off. This is the Big Papa Pump right here, baby. Check
It'll
that
be the
out.
gun show.
Gun show. That's right. So.
For the both of you to answer, you could answer one at a time. Whoever wants to go first after this. When you first started doing this, right? Did you really take everything to heart when you saw the posts, or you just let it roll right off your shoulders? Because you're always going to have the good ones, but then you know what happens. It's like everything. You can have 10,000 good ones, but nobody says anything. Mm-hmm. But then you got the couple people who just say, you got the date wrong, or you got this wrong. Did you guys let it roll when you first happened, or did it take you a long time to let it roll off your shoulders?
Matt?
You know what? It's funny. I think in a lot of ways, because it is such a niche thing, people who tune in tend to tune in because they want to hear you. It's not like, you're preempting their favorite show that used to be on their favorite radio station. And now who's this guy? You're just out there. So, I mean, I really can't think of too many people in my entire, I'll just say the 9 years of the Kiss Room that have been really critical. But then again, in the same way, I don't necessarily talk about the date that had this happen, or that I go back to, this is what my experience was. I'll tell a story about when I was at a show, and that's my version of my memory of what happened to me. So people can't really argue with it. I mean, you get people who, kind of referencing what Ken had said about, they're going to create a better podcast because you suck. And those people always disappear, and I think in a way, I mean, you could have somebody call you up and leave you a dozen messages on Facebook about how to do your goofy podcast. And you can have me on the show and that, but I think ultimately I can't think of really more than I could fit on one hand the number of people. Everybody's pretty positive, every once in a while you get these people that want to come into they'll start sending you messages. And then the one kid who was a total, look, you start saying, I don't understand mental illness, but he would message me, you need to block me from your group on Facebook so I can't see you. But then he would message me via my website to complain. And you go, dude, you're looking for a lot of attention, aren't you? You get these people that are just weird. But I don't, and I can't solve everybody's problems. I think sometimes you realize that I love the fact 99.9% of the people that have ever interacted with me through the Kiss Room have all been cool. Yeah, you remember those couple loonies where you think to yourself, if I saw you crossing the street, I'd push you in front of a truck. I mean, I'd cross to the other side. But it really, it's one of those things where I think because people make a conscious decision to listen, if somebody doesn't like it, look, don't waste your time downloading or clicking on the thing. I mean, what did you expect? It's it's very clear what it is. It's a podcast or a radio show about Kiss, hosted by me, and luckily it's on radio, so you don't even have to look at my face. If you guys that are handsome, it must be easy. When you have a face like this, I don't do video for the most part.
Oh, you're precious and you know it. You are a powerful and attractive man, Matt Porter. Which, by the way, I want to go on record and say this very important thing. If you say my name backwards, it is Slim Neck. So I had to say that. And I'm working on here's an exclusive. This will be the first time it's heard. This is my Doc McGee imitation. You ready? Kiss is really like Cracker Barrel. So there you go.
I think Slim Neck should be your Star Wars name.
I am Slim Neck.
No, it should be a wrestling name, right?
Oh, yeah.
Slim Neck.
Woo! So before we close the show, any words of wisdom for anyone who wants to get into podcasting? Because we often hear, oh, here's another podcast, here's another one, what would you tell someone who wants to get into the beauty of podcasting? Ken?
Love what you're doing. Love the people that you're doing it with. And as far as criticism, let it go right off your back, but take it to heart at the same time, right? If your mic stinks, get a better mic. Do what you can. But what matters is that you speak from the heart, use the intellect that you have, but just be real. That's the biggest thing. And, the guy that's telling you to be real just did David Lee Roth, Doc McGee, and Gene Simmons. So, but on the other hand, I learned very early on that I was a stutterer. I just started right there. I just started there. But I found out that when I was a little kid, if I imitated people, I didn't stutter. It's kind of like Mel Tillis when he sings, So it's the same kind of thing. So I'm like 4 years old, walking around my house, not doing one Beatle imitation. I'm doing Ringo, I'm doing John, I'm doing George, I'm doing Paul. It's just annoying the hell out of my family. Just imagine that little kid walking around speaking Liverpudlian in Andover, Ohio, back in 1960, whatever. So this is a great way to get known and to learn about other people. But there's so many great things. And if you do it for the right reasons, I think the right things will come to you. How about you, Matt?
Fantastic, Matt.
I think really that's what it speaks to, is that you should always do something that you can feel authentic about. You know, people will figure out really quick if you're a poser or a fake. Be yourself. That's what I would tell everybody who wants to do a podcast. You are what your podcast is. You know, I mean, you can have the content is one thing, but people will tune in because they want to hear it from you. Like, and I feel like after all these years, if I'm the bus driver, that you can trust that I'm going to take you someplace interesting. And I think that's that relationship you have with your audience. You guys are building that now by doing really quality things with people that are interesting to talk to, and you give them a platform. And I think that's what's fun, but you're building what is, and obviously people always say, well, KISS is a band or a brand. You're building the brand. What does your show stand for? And people start to trust you, that they know that when they tune in, they're going to get a certain level of quality and consistency and really integrity, in that your show is going to be worth listening to. And the thing that I say really about pretty much everything in my life is that if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. You know, if it becomes a drag to do your podcast, or, oh, I have to do my show again, or don't do it. You know what I mean? The world will not stop spinning because there's only, 8 billion podcasts. I mean, you could never listen to everything that's out there. But there will be people who will find you, and they will like what you do, and they will tune in. And I think so, really, for everybody, I mean, it's like anything. I'll just put a funny aside, was, you know, I just had, we had commencement at Montgomery County Community College. It was a big event. And the student speaker gave the quote, like, you know, always take the shot, always take that moment and make your momentum. And because you'll always think about it if you don't. And you might not, you know, I don't like the word fail, but you might not succeed every time, but you're going to learn something. No matter what you do, you're learning something and you're improving. So as far as podcasting, it's just one more experience in your life. And I really encourage it. If it's something that you want to do, you know, it's great. And I mean, I just think, and what we've mentioned it a couple times in the show, the opportunities that it has given me through my life, just like to meet people and talk to people, that's worth it right there. And I think everybody that's listening, you know, I would really encourage it. You know, get good Wi-Fi, get a good mic, you know, make sure you learn how to at least edit, you know, because somebody's going to come on your podcast. And, you know, look, and I'll say it, and probably won't be a popular opinion, no cursing. Cursing makes you sound stupid. So it's, you know, really you want to try and be professional. I grew up in an era you weren't allowed to curse on the radio. So anytime, like, you know, you had to be more creative because you had to think of better words. I listen to some of these podcasts where every other word they're swearing. I turn it off. I don't like it because it doesn't sound professional to me. So, well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, but if that's your style, if people want to tune in and say, wicked awesome, FFF, more power to them. That'll be your brand. But that would be my advice to people, is make it so, you know, because your mom might want to listen to your podcast and maybe she doesn't want to hear you curse.
That's true.
So have fun with it. That's my advice. If it's not fun, you're not doing it right.
Besides, Matt and I are too sexy and too sweet. Here, Matt, right there. Woo! Besides, where else are you going to hear? This is Doc McGee, and you're listening to the Kiss Army Nation podcast.
Well,
all right.
Guys, truly inspirational words from both of you. Thank you so much for being on the show and joining us on our little adventure. And I hope the KISS Army continues to listen to podcasts and the KISS Room. Guys, thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me on. This was a pleasure. I mean, and good luck with everything you're doing. I think it's fantastic.
We're going to have a world of crazy times.
Yes. And to the KISS Army, thank you so much for your continued support, and hope to see and hear from you in our next installment. Take care, guys. Bye.